It was a calm afternoon, the kind of day where everything seemed normal. The sun was shining gently, and a soft breeze moved the trees. People walked along the streets, busy with their own lives. Some were talking on their phones, others were rushing to appointments, and a few were just enjoying the fresh air. Among these people was Sarah. To anyone passing by, Sarah looked like a regular person, except for one thing. Sarah was blind. She couldn't see the world around her, but she didn't let that stop her from living her life. By her side was her loyal guide dog, Max. Max was a large, calm German shepherd, always walking close to Sarah, helping her avoid obstacles and stay safe. Together, they moved through the city, step by step, in perfect harmony. Sarah walked slowly but confidently, tapping her white cane in front of her while Max carefully guided her along the sidewalk. She had walked this path many times before. It was familiar to her. But even though she appeared calm, there was always a small sense of danger. Being blind meant she had to trust her other senses, her hearing, touch, and of course, Max. Most people didn't notice Sarah as they hurried past her. They didn't stop to think about how brave and strong she was. They didn't think about how much trust she had to put in Max every single day. To them, she was just another woman on the street. But Sarah knew that people often judged her. Some felt sorry for her, assuming she was weak or helpless. Others ignored her completely. But Sarah didn't need their pity. What they didn't know was that she carried a secret, one that no one could have guessed just by looking at her. Max wasn't just any ordinary guide dog. He had a history, a past that most people would never believe. But Sarah knew. She knew everything about Max and his remarkable training. Yet, she never spoke of it to others. There was no need. In her eyes, Max was more than just her guide, he was her protector. But today, as they walked down that familiar street, something was about to happen that would change everything. As Sarah moved along the busy sidewalk, a group of bikers appeared in the distance. There were 4 of them, riding loud motorcycles that roared as they sped down the street. They wore leather jackets and helmets, laughing loudly as they passed by. The noise of their engines made people turn their heads and watch as they zoomed past. When the bikers saw Sarah, they slowed down. From the way they looked at her, it was clear they didn't see a strong, independent woman. Instead, they saw someone they thought was vulnerable, someone they could tease or make fun of. To them, Sarah was an easy target. She couldn't see them, couldn't fight back, or so they thought. One of the bikers nudged his friend and pointed at Sarah. "Hey, look at her," he said with a grin. "Blind lady with a dog. This should be fun." His friend laughed and shook his head, but they all slowed down and circled around Sarah, their bikes growling like wild animals ready to attack. Max, sensing the change in the air, tensed slightly but stayed close to Sarah's side. He didn't bark or growl. He was trained not to react, but inside, he was alert. He could feel the tension building. Sarah could hear the sound of the bikes around her, the engines revving loudly, and the laughter of the men. Even though she couldn't see them, she could sense their presence, their intentions. She gripped Max's leash a little tighter, feeling his steady body beside her. She trusted him, knowing he would keep her safe no matter what. The bikers began to circle closer. "Hey lady," one of them shouted. "Can you even hear us? Or are you deaf too?" Another biker laughed. "She's got that dog to do everything for her. Must be a sad life, huh?" They thought it was funny, mocking someone who couldn't see them. They didn't realize how strong Sarah really was. They didn't know the kind of courage it took for her to walk these streets every day, trusting her life to Max. They couldn't see the strength inside her, the quiet determination that kept her going, even when others looked down on her. But Sarah stayed calm. She had faced people like this before. People who didn't understand her, who thought they could make her feel small just because she was different. She didn't let their words get to her. Instead, she focused on Max. She could feel his body, steady and still, ready to act if needed. She trusted him completely. She knew that Max would protect her, just as he always had. One of the bikers rode even closer, his bike rumbling loudly right next to her. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue," he sneered. He revved his engine again, trying to scare her, trying to make her jump. But Sarah didn't flinch. She just kept walking, her head held high. Inside, Sarah felt a mix of emotions. There was fear, yes, but also a deep sense of calm. She knew something the bikers didn't. She knew that Max wasn't just any guide dog. Max had been trained for something far more important before he became her companion. Max had once been a presidential guard canine, serving in the highest levels of security. He had protected world leaders and was trained to handle danger in ways these bikers could never imagine. But Sarah kept that secret to herself. She didn't need to explain it to them. She knew that if things got serious, Max would be ready. He would protect her, just as he had been trained to do. The bikers could laugh all they wanted, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. As Sarah continued walking, the bikers' laughter grew louder. They thought they were in control. They thought they were intimidating her. But little did they know, they were the ones who were about to be surprised. Max was watching them closely, ready to act if they got too close. In that moment, the stage was set. The bikers, confident in their cruelty, had no idea what was coming. Sarah, walking quietly with her guide dog, held the key to a secret that would soon change everything. It was a bright afternoon, and the streets were filled with people going about their usual activities. Some were chatting on their phones, others were hurrying to get somewhere, while a few were simply enjoying the peaceful day. Among them was Sarah, quietly walking down the sidewalk. She had her guide dog, Max, by her side, leading her as she tapped her white cane to help her navigate. To anyone passing by, Sarah looked like any other blind woman out for a walk. But there was something about Sarah that made her different, even though most people didn't notice. Sarah was independent and brave. Being blind didn't stop her from living her life. She trusted Max completely, knowing he would keep her safe no matter where they went. Max wasn't just her eyes, he was her companion, her protector. As Sarah walked, she felt the familiar rhythm of Max's movements beside her. It was comforting. She knew this route well. She had walked it many times before, and despite her blindness, she moved with confidence. The soft sounds of the city surrounded her, cars passing by, people talking, footsteps on the pavement. Everything seemed normal. But not far away, a different sound was approaching: loud motorcycles, their engines roaring like thunder. 4 bikers, all dressed in leather jackets and helmets, were speeding down the street, laughing and shouting as they rode. The noise of their bikes filled the air, and people turned their heads to watch as they passed. The bikers were having a good time, showing off and enjoying the attention. They were cocky and loud, thinking they owned the road. As they rode closer to Sarah, one of them spotted her walking alone with Max. The sight of her, a blind woman with her guide dog, caught their attention. "Hey, look at her," one of the bikers said, pointing in Sarah's direction. "Blind girl with a dog. What's she doing out here all alone?" The others laughed, finding it funny that Sarah was walking by herself. To them, she looked like an easy target, someone they could mess with for their own amusement. They didn't see a strong, capable woman. They saw someone who they thought was weak, someone who couldn't see them or defend herself. "Let's go have some fun," another biker said with a grin. They slowed their bikes down and started to circle around Sarah, revving their engines loudly as they approached. The sound of their motorcycles grew closer and closer, and Sarah could hear them now, even though she couldn't see what was happening. Her heart began to beat a little faster. She tightened her grip on Max's leash, sensing the tension in the air. She knew something wasn't right. The noise of the bikers felt too close, too aggressive. Max, always alert, stayed calm, but his body tensed slightly, ready to react if needed. One of the bikers, a tall man with a deep voice, shouted at Sarah as he rode by. "What's a blind girl like you doing out here by yourself?" His words were filled with mockery, as if he found it ridiculous that Sarah was out walking alone. Sarah didn't respond. She kept walking, her head held high, her focus on Max and the path ahead. She had dealt with people like this before, people who didn't understand, who saw her blindness as a weakness. But Sarah wasn't weak. She had learned long ago that staying calm and trusting Max was the best way to handle situations like this. The bikers, however, weren't done. They circled around her again, their laughter growing louder. One of them revved his engine right next to her, making a loud, harsh sound that startled the people around them. But Sarah kept moving forward, refusing to let them scare her. Max stayed close by her side, his steady presence giving her the confidence she needed. Another biker, riding closer this time, shouted, "Can you even hear us, lady? Or are you deaf too?" His cruel words were followed by more laughter from his friends. They thought it was funny to taunt someone who couldn't see them, to make fun of her because she seemed vulnerable. But Sarah wasn't deaf. She heard every word they said, and it only made her grip Max's leash even tighter. She knew they were trying to intimidate her, trying to make her feel small. But she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. She had learned to be strong, to face challenges head-on, and today would be no different. The bikers continued to circle around her, their motorcycles growling like angry beasts. Sarah could feel the tension building, and she knew she had to stay focused. Max was calm, but she could sense that he was ready to act if things got worse. Sarah trusted him completely. She knew that Max wasn't just any guide dog, he had been trained for dangerous situations, and he wouldn't hesitate to protect her if needed. One of the bikers, a man with a rough voice, rode even closer. "What's the matter? You too scared to talk?" he sneered. His bike rumbled loudly as he revved the engine again, trying to make her jump. But Sarah didn't react. She kept her head up and continued walking, her steps steady, her mind focused on staying calm. The bikers didn't know who they were dealing with. They thought Sarah was an easy target, someone they could push around without consequences. But what they didn't realize was that Sarah wasn't alone. Max was more than just a guide dog, he was a trained protector, ready to defend her if things went too far. As the bikers laughed and jeered, Max remained silent, his sharp eyes watching their every move. He was waiting, ready to act if Sarah needed him. The bikers had no idea that the dog walking beside her was a former military canine, trained to handle situations far more dangerous than this. The tension in the air was thick. Sarah could feel it, and so could Max. The bikers thought they were in control, but they were wrong. They had no idea what was about to happen. They had underestimated Sarah and her loyal dog, and soon, they would regret it. The conflict had been set. The bikers, full of arrogance and disrespect, believed they could mock and intimidate Sarah without any consequences. But Sarah, with Max by her side, was stronger than they realized. The unfairness of the situation was clear. Sarah was being targeted simply because of her blindness, something she had no control over. But she had control over her courage, and with Max's quiet strength beside her, she was ready for whatever came next. The stage was set for a confrontation, and the bikers were about to learn that they had picked the wrong person to mess with. The tension was building, and soon, everything would change. The sound of the bikers' roaring engines filled the air, growing louder and louder as they circled around Sarah. Their taunts echoed down the street, cruel and sharp, meant to make her feel scared and alone. They were laughing, enjoying the sight of a blind woman trying to walk peacefully with her guide dog by her side. To them, she looked weak, like someone they could push around. They thought she wouldn't fight back because she couldn't see them. But they had no idea how wrong they were. Sarah kept walking, her steps steady, her head held high. She didn't show any sign of fear, even though inside she could feel the tension rising. The bikers were getting closer, their voices louder, their behavior more aggressive. But Sarah wasn't alone. Max, her loyal guide dog, was walking right beside her, calm and focused, his strong body moving smoothly next to her. To most people, Max looked like any other guide dog, helping Sarah navigate her way. But there was something special about Max, something the bikers didn't know. As the bikers revved their engines, trying to scare her, Max's ears flicked slightly. His muscles tensed, just for a moment, but he stayed by Sarah's side, not making a sound. He was alert, ready, watching the bikers with sharp, careful eyes. If anyone had been paying close attention, they might have noticed the way Max moved, how his body seemed prepared for anything, how his eyes followed every movement around him. But the bikers were too busy laughing, too distracted by their own arrogance. They didn't see the quiet strength in the dog walking beside Sarah. One of the bikers, a man with a deep, harsh voice, revved his engine loudly as he sped past Sarah, getting so close that she could feel the rush of air from his bike. "What's wrong, blind girl? Can't you hear us?" he shouted, his words filled with mockery. He thought he could scare her, make her feel small. But Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't even turn her head toward him. She just kept walking, her hand gripping Max's leash, trusting her dog completely. Max, sensing the biker's closeness, slowed down just a bit, making sure to stay in perfect sync with Sarah. His eyes remained locked on the bikers, studying them, analyzing their movements. He was calm, but inside, his instincts were on high alert. Max wasn't just a guide dog, he had been trained for situations far more dangerous than this. But the bikers had no idea. They didn't see the sharpness in Max's gaze, the quiet power in his movements. All they saw was a dog leading a blind woman, and they thought that made them superior. Another biker, this one younger and louder, came closer. He pulled up beside Sarah and laughed as he revved his engine again. "Hey, lady. You need some help finding your way," he sneered, his voice dripping with fake kindness. The other bikers laughed along with him, thinking they were clever. They had no respect for Sarah or her dog. To them, this was just a game. Sarah didn't respond. She had learned long ago that some people would never understand her strength. They would always see her blindness first and think it made her weak. But Sarah knew who she was, and she knew she wasn't helpless. She had faced many challenges in her life, and she had come out stronger every time. This was just another obstacle, and she wasn't going to let a few loud bikers shake her confidence. Max, ever vigilant, stayed close to her side, his body ready to move if needed. He could feel the tension building in the air, the way the bikers were becoming more aggressive. But Max was trained for this. He wasn't just a guide dog, he had a past, one that most people didn't know about. He had served in the military, trained to handle dangerous situations with precision and skill. He had been a canine hero, saving lives and protecting people in ways these bikers couldn't even imagine. But Max didn't show off his strength. He stayed calm, focused on Sarah, ready to act if things got worse. His years of training had taught him how to stay composed under pressure, how to assess a threat without showing fear. And right now, Max was doing just that. He was watching the bikers closely, analyzing their behavior, waiting for the right moment to step in if needed. As the bikers continued to circle around, their taunts growing louder and meaner, Sarah kept her pace steady. She could feel the tension, but she didn't let it break her focus. She trusted Max completely. She knew he was more than capable of protecting her if things got out of hand. She could sense the strength in his movements, the way he stayed alert without being aggressive. Max was her protector, and she knew he wouldn't let anything happen to her. The bikers, however, were growing bolder. They thought Sarah was too scared to respond, that her silence meant they had control over the situation. One of them, a man with a scar running down his cheek, pulled up right in front of Sarah, blocking her path. "Where do you think you're going?" he sneered, his voice filled with arrogance. "You can't even see us. What makes you think you can just walk away?" Max's muscles tensed slightly as the biker came closer. His sharp eyes locked onto the man, his body poised and ready. But still, Max didn't move. He waited, knowing that Sarah was still in control. He trusted her as much as she trusted him. But if the time came, Max would be ready to act. The biker laughed, thinking he had won. He looked at Max, not seeing the danger the dog posed. To him, Max was just a regular guide dog, nothing more. "Is your dog going to protect you, blind girl?" the biker taunted, his voice filled with cruelty. "What's he going to do, bark at us?" But Max didn't bark. He didn't growl. He stayed calm, his eyes never leaving the biker. The man had no idea what he was dealing with. He had no idea that the dog standing in front of him was a trained canine hero, ready to defend Sarah if things escalated. Max's training had prepared him for moments like this, moments when he had to stay calm under pressure, waiting for the right time to act. The tension in the air was thick, and Sarah could feel it. She knew the bikers were trying to push her, to make her feel scared and powerless. But she wasn't scared. She had Max by her side, and she trusted him with her life. She could sense the strength in him, the quiet power that the bikers were too blind to see. As the bikers laughed and taunted, Sarah kept her focus, knowing that Max was ready. The bikers had no idea what was coming. They thought they were in control, but they were wrong. Max wasn't just any dog, and Sarah wasn't just any blind woman. They were a team, and soon, the bikers would find out just how wrong they had been. The rising action was building, the bikers becoming more aggressive, but Sarah and Max remained steady. The small hints were there: Max's tense muscles, his sharp gaze, the calm way he handled the situation. But the full truth of Max's abilities remained hidden, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. The bikers had no idea who they were dealing with, and soon, their arrogance would come crashing down. The tension in the air had reached its peak. The bikers were getting more aggressive, their voices louder and their actions bolder. One of them, the leader with a scar down his cheek, stepped off his bike and walked directly toward Sarah. His boots crunched on the pavement as he moved closer, a cruel smile spreading across his face. The others laughed, revving their engines behind him, their noise filling the street. They thought they had her cornered, that they had all the power. They had no idea what was about to happen. "Where do you think you're going, huh?" the leader sneered, standing just a few feet away from Sarah. "You can't even see me. How are you going to stop me from doing whatever I want?" Sarah stood still, calm as ever, her hand resting firmly on Max's leash. She could feel the tension in her dog's body. Max was alert, his sharp eyes trained on the man in front of them. He was ready. But Sarah hadn't given him any command yet. She wanted to see just how far these bikers would go before they realized their mistake. The leader took another step forward, his grin growing wider. "Come on, lady," he mocked. "What's a blind girl like you going to do out here by herself? You think your dog's going to save you?" His words dripped with arrogance, and the other bikers laughed harder. They thought this was just a game, that they had full control of the situation. None of them noticed the subtle change in Max's posture. The way his body shifted slightly, his muscles tensing, preparing for what might come next. Sarah could feel it, though. She could sense that Max was ready, waiting for her signal. But she stayed calm, her face showing no fear. The leader raised his hand, as if to push Sarah aside, and that was the moment everything changed. Before he could take another step, before his hand could come any closer, Max moved. In an instant, the calm, steady guide dog transformed into something else entirely. With incredible speed and precision, Max lunged forward, placing himself between Sarah and the biker. His movements were sharp, controlled, and so fast that the leader barely had time to react. Max's sudden movement caused the leader to stumble back, his eyes widening in shock. The other bikers, still on their bikes, stopped laughing. The sound of their engines seemed to die down as they watched in stunned silence. None of them had expected this. To them, Max had just been a quiet, harmless guide dog. They had no idea that they were dealing with a highly trained protector, a dog with a past they couldn't have imagined. The leader stared at Max, his face pale, his confident smile now gone. He hadn't expected any resistance, and certainly not from a dog. He tried to step back, but Max stood firm, his body blocking the man's path. There was something in Max's eyes, a fierceness that none of the bikers had seen before. It was as if Max was silently warning them not to take another step. For the first time, the bikers looked uncertain. They glanced at each other, no longer sure of what to do. Their leader, who had been so confident just moments ago, was now frozen in place, clearly afraid to move. The tension in the air was thick, and no one dared to make a sound. And then, in that quiet moment, Sarah spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and strong. "I wouldn't test him if I were you," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "Max isn't just any guide dog." The bikers stared at her, confused, still trying to process what had just happened. "What do you mean?" the leader muttered, his voice shaking. He took a small step back, clearly intimidated by Max's presence. Sarah smiled softly, still calm, still composed. "Max is a retired military canine," she said, her words cutting through the air like a knife. "He served in the special forces. He's trained to protect, and he's saved lives before." The weight of her words hit the bikers like a ton of bricks. Their eyes widened in shock as they looked at Max again, this time with new understanding. This wasn't just a dog. This was a trained hero, a protector who had been in dangerous situations far worse than this. Max had seen combat, and he had been trained to defend those in need, no matter the cost. The leader's face turned pale, the color draining from his cheeks as he realized the gravity of the situation. He had thought he was in control, but now he knew just how wrong he had been. This dog, the one he had mocked and underestimated, was capable of far more than he could have ever imagined. Max stood tall, his body still tense, his eyes locked on the leader. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, he didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to send a clear message. The bikers were no longer laughing. They were no longer mocking Sarah. Instead, they were silent, too stunned to speak. Sarah continued to stand calmly, her hand resting on Max's leash, fully in control of the situation. She knew Max had everything under control, and she trusted him completely. The bikers, who had once thought they were so powerful, now stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Finally, the leader broke the silence. His voice was weak, shaky, a far cry from the arrogant tone he had used before. "Let's go," he muttered to the others, his eyes never leaving Max. "Let's just go." The other bikers nodded quickly, eager to leave. They revved their engines, but this time there was no laughter, no jeering. They were too shaken by what they had just witnessed. One by one, they turned their bikes around and sped off down the street, their loud engines fading into the distance. Sarah stood still for a moment, watching them leave. Max stayed by her side, calm and composed once again, his body relaxed now that the danger had passed. He had done his job, and he had done it perfectly. Once the bikers were out of sight, Sarah knelt down and gave Max a gentle pat on the head. "Good boy," she whispered, smiling at her loyal companion. Max looked up at her, his eyes soft and full of trust. He had protected her, just like he always did. As Sarah and Max continued on their walk, the street felt quiet again, peaceful. The bikers were gone, and with them, the threat they had posed. But Sarah wasn't afraid. She knew that no matter what happened, she could always count on Max to be there for her, to protect her when she needed it most. And while the bikers might never forget the day they crossed paths with a retired military K-9, Sarah and Max would simply continue their journey, side by side, as an unstoppable team. As the roar of the motorcycles faded into the distance, the street grew quiet once more. The air, which had been thick with tension just moments ago, now felt calm.